There's a reason ziggurats and pyramids look so similar, and it has nothing to do with aliens. The answer is hidden in ancient texts that describe gods who organized reality into vertical levels of power. Walk through the cuneiform archives of ancient Mesopotamia, and you'll find something remarkable: descriptions of divine beings called the Anunnaki, who built the cosmos in rising layers. Temple hymns praising ziggurats as bonds between heaven and earth. Creation myths where order rises upward from chaos. All of this was written 1,000 years before Egypt built its first pyramid. The connection isn't mystical, it's historical. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. If you're ready to trace pyramid symbolism back to its true origins, hit that like button and subscribe. The visuals add depth, but aren't essential. Tell us in the comments where are you listening from, and what time is it there. You're about to follow an idea across 3,000 years. Let's begin. The pyramid form appears in Egypt, suddenly, fully formed in symbolic purpose, as though the idea itself arrived complete, because it did not through invasion or instruction, but through the inheritance of a shared religious language that spanned the ancient Near East, a vocabulary of elevation that spoke of divine authority, cosmic hierarchy, and the human instinct to reach toward meaning through stone. Night falls over the Giza plateau, and the ancient stones begin to glow. The setting sun turns the limestone gold, painting long shadows across the sand. The pyramids rise in perfect alignment, their angles sharp against the dimming sky. Their presence is so monumental that distance itself seems to collapse around them. The last tour buses pull away. Voices fade into the desert wind. And in the stillness that follows, something shifts. The monuments stop being architectural achievements and become what they have always been: expressions of an idea older than their stones. Not tombs alone, not royal vanity, but diagrams of existence drawn in geometry. Symbols before they were structures, myths before they were monuments. The Great Pyramid has stood here for 4,500 years. But the meaning it carries, the vertical cosmos, the sacred mountain, the bridge between mortal and divine, existed for thousands of years before the first block was cut. Encoded in earlier temples, described in earlier texts, and built into the religious imagination of civilizations that rose along rivers 1,500 miles to the east. For generations, we have been taught a clear story: the pyramid is an Egyptian invention. It begins with Djoser's step pyramid at Saqqara around 2630 BC, a tomb structure that grew from earlier rectangular mastabas, commissioned by the pharaoh, and designed by his architect Imhotep. The form develops quickly from steps tiers to the smooth-sided true pyramid, perfected at Giza under Khufu around 2580 BC. The pyramids are funerary monuments, royal tombs designed to secure the pharaoh's passage into the afterlife, built through the organizational genius of a unified kingdom. It is a story of Egyptian ingenuity, stone and ambition, kings and eternity. Textbooks present it as architectural evolution in isolation. Museums display Egyptian pyramid models beside Egyptian tools, Egyptian texts, Egyptian statues. The story is self-contained. Egypt invents monumental sacred architecture, develops it, perfects it, and the pyramid becomes the defining symbol of their civilization. But the cuneiform tablets remember differently. The story is not wrong. It is incomplete. The Egyptians did build the pyramids. They did perfect the form, encode their beliefs into its passages, and turn it into the highest expression of their worldview. But they did not invent pyramid symbolism. They adapted it, made it local, and gave architectural form to ideas that had been spreading through the Near Eastern religious imagination since the 4th millennium BC. Ideas preserved in the oldest written texts humanity ever produced. Well, this recognition does not come from guessing. It rises from the written evidence itself, from Sumerian king lists, Akkadian creation epics, Babylonian temple hymns, and Egyptian pyramid texts that speak the same symbolic language in different scripts. Consider the cuneiform sources. The Anunnaki appear in Sumerian texts, dating to 3000 BC, described not as space travelers, but as divine authorities who decided fates and shaped cosmic order. They ruled the universe, clearly organized into vertical levels, and governed the heavens. Enlil commanded the air. Enki managed the waters below. Authority came from above. Hierarchy was physical. The cosmos itself was a pyramid of power. This was not abstract philosophy. It became architecture. Ziggurat steps, terraced temple mountains begin appearing in Mesopotamia by the late 4th millennium BC, more than 1,000 years before Egypt's first pyramid. They were called mountain houses, homes of the gods, structures built to link earth with heaven. The ziggurat of Ur, built around 2100 BC, rose in 3 huge tiers. Its summit was only reachable by priests who performed rituals to connect with the divine. The great Anunnaki of Babylon had a name that translates directly as house of the foundation of heaven and earth. These were not tombs. No burials happened inside them. Their purpose was rising, communion, the physical expression of a worldview where the divine lived above and kingship stood between worlds. The ziggurat was a cosmic diagram before it was a building. And now consider the Egyptian pyramid texts carved inside 5th and 6th dynasty pyramids beginning around 2400 BC. They describe the dead pharaoh rising to the stars, becoming one of the imperishable ones, the circumpolar constellations that never set. The pyramid is called a stairway, a ramp, a ladder reaching toward the sky. The king does not simply lie in the pyramid. He rises through it, changing from mortal to divine, crossing from earth to heaven. The belief system is built the same way as Mesopotamian cosmology. Vertical space carries sacred hierarchy. The monument allows transformation. Kingship bridges the human and divine. Even the creation myths match. Egyptian cosmology describes the first mound rising out of none, the waters of chaos. The first solid thing rising upward into existence. The Benben stone kept in the temple of Heliopolis symbolized this moment of creation. The pyramid's shape echoes it, or a rising from chaos, pointing upward, frozen in geometry. Mesopotamian creation texts describe Tiamat, the saltwater chaos, defeated by Marduk, who uses her body to build the ordered universe heaven above, earth below, the Absu beneath. Creation is not sideways, but vertical, layered, rising toward divine authority. The symbolism comes before the stones. If this is true, if pyramid symbolism grows out of Mesopotamian religious thought and spreads through cultural exchange across the ancient Near East, then everything about how we understand the pyramids changes. They are not isolated Egyptian inventions. They are local expressions of a shared sacred vocabulary, a shared way of understanding how divine authority, cosmic structure, and human kingship meet through vertical geometry. The pyramid does not mark Egypt's beginning. It marks Egypt's place in a wider conversation about the architecture of meaning, one that began when the first cities rose in Sumer and the first priests described gods living on mountains that touched the sky. The Anunnaki did not build pyramids with advanced technology. They defined the cosmic logic that made pyramids meaningful. They set the grammar of sacred space elevation. Hierarchy, ascent, ideas that would echo through thousands of years, expressed differently in different cultures, but rooted in the same basic insight: reaching upward is reaching toward order, toward authority, outward the divine. The evidence does not belong to one subject. It is spread across fields that rarely talk to one another. Astronomy translates cuneiform tablets describing cosmic order and temple symbolism. Egyptology reads pyramid texts that describe transformation and descent. Comparative religion finds matching structures in creation myths, separated by centuries and distance. Archaeology dates ziggurats and mastabas, tracking the growth of monumental sacred architecture across regions. Art history follows images of sacred mountains, divine hierarchies, and royal legitimacy through seals, carvings, and temple art. Piece by piece, these fragments form a clear story, one that asks us to look past the usual story of Egyptian uniqueness and see a deeper continuity of thought, a thread connecting the earliest literate civilization to the monuments that still fill our imagination. Tonight we begin that journey. We will trace pyramid symbolism backward from Giza to Sumer, from stone to myth, from monument to meaning. We will examine the Anunnaki not as fringe ideas, but as documented gods. This cosmic role shaped how humanity first understood vertical space as sacred space. We will walk through ziggurat inscriptions and pyramid texts, through creation myths and temple hymns, through the physical evidence of architecture and the written evidence of belief. Each chapter will return to the same basic question: where did the pyramid idea truly begin? Not the structure, but the symbol. Not the tomb, but the meaning. The answer is in the oldest written words we have, and in recognizing that before Egypt ever raised its monuments, Mesopotamia had already drawn the blueprint in clay. The question begins. In silence. Stand at the base of the Great Pyramid as the last light fades. And you are standing where two stories meet. One is written in stone, Egyptian, dynastic, recorded through hieroglyphs and king lists and centuries of archaeology. The other is written in what is missing in the symbolic logic that made this shape meaningful before anyone tried to build it, in the religious currents that flowed through the ancient Near East long before limestone was cut. At Giza, the pyramid exists because the idea of the pyramid already existed, not as a blueprint or building plan, but as sacred grammar, a geometric language, for saying what words could not: the structure of reality itself, the relationship between earth and heaven, the spatial logic of divine authority. This is not a claim about who built what or when. It is a claim about meaning, about why this form, out of endless possible forms, became the chosen vessel for humanity's earliest pictures of cosmic order, about why civilizations separated by geography, language, and centuries arrived at the same symbolic answer. Elevation is holiness, ascent is transformation, the mountain as the axis where mortal and divine meet. The Egyptians built the Pyramids, but they did not imagine them first. By the time Imhotep designed Djoser's step pyramid around 2630 BC, Sumerian city-states had been writing for more than 500 years. Cuneiform writing, humanity's first script, appeared in Ur and Uruk around 3200 BC, first to track grain and livestock, but quickly growing to record something far deeper: how the gods organized the cosmos. The earliest religious texts from Mesopotamia describe a universe arranged in tiers. Heaven belonged to Anu, the sky god. The air and earth belonged to Enlil, who commanded winds and decrees. The freshwater abyss below belonged to Enki, keeper of wisdom and craft. Between and beneath these realms were the Anunnaki, divine judges and administrators who kept cosmic order, who decided fates and made sure the structure held. This was not chaos. It was hierarchy. Written as religion. Authority flowed downward from heaven. Power was positional. The gods themselves had ranks, and those ranks were spatial, literally vertical. To climb was to approach divine authority. To go downward was to enter the realms of the dead and forgotten. And so the first monumental architecture in Mesopotamia took a form that mirrored this worldview: the ziggurat. Not pyramids in the Egyptian sense. These were step platforms, terraced mountains of mudbrick, yet pyramids in symbolic essence. They rose in stages. They lifted priests and kings toward the heavens. They showed, in physical space, the layered structure of reality as Mesopotamians understood it. The White Temple at Uruk, built on a huge platform around 3200 BC, predates the first Egyptian pyramid by 600 years. The purpose was clear: to create an artificial mountain where none existed naturally, and to give the gods a home lifted above the human world, to establish a physical connection between earth and sky. Why mountains? Across ancient cultures, mountains are sacred: Olympus in Greece, Kailash in Tibet, Sinai in the Levant, Fuji in Japan. They are thresholds, borderlands where the ordinary world gives way to something beyond. They are dangerous, liminal, and holy. Gods live on peaks. Revelations happen at summits. To climb is to leave the everyday world behind. Mesopotamia had no mountains. The land between the Tigris and Euphrates is a flat alluvial plain, built from rivers silt over thousands of years. Yet the myths are filled with sacred mountains, cosmic peaks, where divine councils meet, where fates are decided, where heaven and earth touch. The ziggurat was the answer to a missing landscape. If the gods required mountains, humans would build them. If cosmic order demanded vertical space, architecture would provide it. Egypt had a different relationship with height. The desert plateau already provided natural elevation. Limestone cliffs lined the Nile Valley. Yet when Egyptian kingship rose and sought to show its connection to the divine, it reached for the same symbolic form Mesopotamia had already described. The sacred mountain, the step ascent, the geometric picture of hierarchy. Djoser's step pyramid does not look like an accident. It does not look like trial and error. It looks like a translation, an idea shaped in local materials, adapted to local beliefs, but recognizable in its basic purpose. The pharaoh rises, the structure bridges, the shape means. And the question is not whether Egypt invented pyramids. The question is whether Egypt invented pyramid symbolism, the idea that a huge geometric structure rising toward the sky could carry royal transformation, divine communion, and cosmic participation. The timeline suggests no. The shared belief suggests no. The historical record of contact between Egypt and Mesopotamia, through trade, diplomacy, and the movement of craftsmen and ideas along ancient routes, suggests no. Symbols travel. Ideas move. Sacred vocabularies are borrowed, adapted, changed. Egypt did not exist alone. The Nile Valley sat at the crossroads of African, Mediterranean, and Near Eastern worlds. To imagine that Egyptian pyramid symbolism appeared in a vacuum, separate from the monumental, sacred architecture already thriving in Sumer and Akkad, is to ignore the networks that link these civilizations. So we return to the central question, the one that changes everything: where did the pyramid begin, not as stone, but as an idea? The answer is not in Egypt, but in the earliest written testimony humanity possesses in the cuneiform archives of Mesopotamia, where the Anunnaki first decided fates and priests first described gods, descending from cosmic mountains, where sacred geometry was written in myth. Before it became monuments. Before the pyramid had a name in Egyptian, it had a meaning in Sumerian. And that meaning would shape how humanity understood divinity, authority, and transcendence for the next 5,000 years. The Anunnaki have become myth. Twice, first in ancient times, and then again in modern times. Modern stories turned them into aliens, genetic engineers, ancient astronauts. They came from the stars to build monuments and change human DNA. These stories fill popular culture, repeated in documentaries and best-selling books. Cut off from what the ancient texts actually say. Strip away the modern stories, and the Anunnaki appear as something more grounded in history and more theologically complex, divine officials who maintained cosmic or are not builders or visitors, but judges and administrators, the council, through which the high gods governed reality itself. The cuneiform sources are clear about this. The word Anunnaki appears in Sumerian, Akkadian, and Babylonian texts across nearly 2,000 years, from the early dynastic period through the first millennium BC. The name itself combines Anu, the sky god, and Kai, the earth, marking them as offspring or extensions of heavenly authority expressed through earthly administration. They are often linked with the Igigi, another divine group, though the differences blur over time and place. What stays consistent is their job. They decide, they judge, they set destinies. In the Sumerian poem Gilgamesh, Enkidu, and the Netherworld, the Anunnaki are described as judges in the underworld, weighing the fates of the dead. In the Akkadian Ascent of Ishtar, they sit in council, keeping the laws that govern even the gods. The Epic of Gilgamesh places them at key moments where cosmic decisions must be made: the decision to send the flood, the judgment of mortality, the boundary between divine and human realms. They are not creators. They are not architects. They are enforcers of cosmic law, middle figures between the highest gods and the ordered universe. Those gods established. To understand the Anunnaki's role, you must understand the worldview they lived in. Mesopotamian religion organized the universe into three main zones, each ruled by a major god. Anu ruled the heavens, the highest realm, distant and absolute. Enlil ruled the air and the earth's surface, the realm of weather, kingship, and human life. Enki, Chaldean Akkadian, ruled the Abzu, the freshwater abyss under the earth, the realm of wisdom, craft, and hidden knowledge. This was not just geography. It was a map of authority. Anu's orders flowed through Enlil, who carried them out in the middle world where humans lived. Enki provided the secret knowledge needed for civilization. Writing, irrigation, temple building, ritual, always within the hierarchy set by the gods above. The Anunnaki worked inside this system. The Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation epic written around 1800 BC, describes Marduk rising to supreme power over the older gods. After defeating Tiamat, the chaos ocean, Marduk organizes the cosmos into signs. The Anunnaki, their positions 300 in the heavens, he stationed as guard. The ways of earth he defined in like manner. 600 he caused to dwell in both heaven and earth. After ordering the decrees, he gave the Anunnaki of heaven and earth their shares. 600 gods. 300 above, 300 below, each given cosmic duties, each maintaining part of divine order. This is government, not fantasy. The universe runs by delegation. Authority moves through channels. The Anunnaki are those channels, divine middle managers keeping the structure standing. The phrase decreeing the fates appears again and again in cuneiform texts, always tied to cosmic maintenance, not random power. In Sumerian thought, fate Nam was not fixed destiny in the modern sense, but a cosmic assignment. The proper job each being and thing must do to keep universal order. To decree fates was to assign roles, set boundaries, and make sure everything stayed in its correct place in the hierarchy of existence. The Anunnaki do this together in council. The Atrahasis epic, which comes before the biblical flood story by centuries, describes the Anunnaki gathering to decide humanity's fate after people grow too many and too loud. The decision is not random. It comes from discussion, from the need to restore balance, from the understanding that cosmic order has been disturbed. This is spatial religion. The gods have positions. Those positions carry authority. Authority decides what can and cannot be. Reality itself is built vertically, with power ascending from heaven through ranks until it reaches the human world. Yes. And this vertical structure required vertical buildings. Temple hymns from Mesopotamian cities describe sanctuaries as meeting points between divine and human rule. The temple is called a house, but also understood as a cosmic anchor, the place where heaven's authority touched earth. Ziggurats connected to these temples had names that carried their purpose. The Temenenki, house of the foundation of heaven and earth, and mountain house and bond of heaven and earth. These were not just figures of speech. They were architectural beliefs. Ziggurats turned the cosmic hierarchy into physical form. Layered, rising, bridging the gap between divine rule above and human worship below. Kings climbed the steps to consult the gods. Priests performed rituals at the summit where heaven met earth. But the structure itself was a diagram of how the Anunnaki understood reality: tiered, ordered, vertical. When pyramid symbolism appears in Egypt centuries later, it carries the same religious DNA transformation. The rising, authority through elevation, communion through architectural connection between realms. The pharaoh does not merely die and rest. He rises, crossing the boundaries. The Anunnaki once guarded, entering the celestial order the Mesopotamian gods first mapped. The pyramid is not an Egyptian invention. It is Mesopotamian logic turned into stone, a monument to the same cosmic hierarchy the Anunnaki managed when the first cities rose in Sumer. And the first priests learned to write the words heaven and earth, and understood them as Positions, not places. Before humans built mountains, they imagined them. Before the first brick was placed in Uruk or the first stone cut at Saqqara. Creation myths across the ancient world described emergence, order rising from chaos, land appearing from water, the first solid point breaking the surface. The primordial nothing. The mountain was never only geography. It was cosmology. Drawn as landscape. In Mesopotamian thought, creation did not happen everywhere at once. It began at a single point in axis where the ordered world first broke through the shapeless waters of chaos. The Enuma Elish describes Tiamat, the saltwater chaos, and Abzu, the freshwater abyss, mixing. Before separation. When Marduk defeats Tiamat, he splits her body half. Becomes the heavens, half becomes the earth. Order appears through division. Through setting boundaries, through creating vertical space. And at the center of this organized cosmos stands the cosmic mountain, the axis around which reality itself turns. The Sumerians called it Kur, a word meaning both mountain and foreign land, showing the edge of the known world, the threshold between human and divine. It appears in the earliest myths as the place where heaven and earth were once joined before Enlil separated them. The point from which all distances are measured, the anchor holding the cosmos in alignment. This was religion, not rock science. Mesopotamia had no mountains. The land between the rivers was flat, built from silt over thousands of years, wide and level. Yet the myths insisted on height. On peaks, on sacred places where divine authority lived. Geography could not give it. Imagination did. Egyptian cosmology follows the same logic with different images. In the Heliopolitan creation story, the universe begins as none, the dark, endless waters of non-existence. From none rises the Benben, the first mound, the first solid thing in creation. On top of this mound stands Atum, the self-created god who brings forth the first divine pair Shu, air, and Tefnut, moisture. From them, the cosmos unfolds. Sky separated from earth, order taken from chaos. The Benben becomes a sacred symbol kept in the temple at Heliopolis. It represents the moment creation begins, the point where existence starts, and its shape, narrowing upward, encodes the same idea Mesopotamian myths describe. Emergence is rising, creation is ascent, order rising from the waters below. Both cultures tell the same structure. Not the pyramid as a building, but the pyramid as a cosmic rule. The idea that creation moves upward, that the sacred appears through height, that divine authority lives in elevated space. Comparative mythology calls this pattern the axis mundi, the world axis, the cosmic center, the point where vertical communication between worlds is possible. It appears everywhere. Yggdrasil in Norse myth, Mount Meru in Hindu cosmology, the world tree in Siberian shamanism, Jacob's ladder in Abrahamic tradition. The axis is always vertical. It always connects heaven above, underworld below, with the human world between. To approach the axis is to approach the mechanism of cosmic order itself, the channel through which divine authority flows downward, and human prayer rises upward. Mesopotamia's ziggurats would make this ideal literal, not just pictures of mountains, but working axes, bridges between worlds. But the concept came first, long before the buildings. Written in myth, then acted out in ritual, and only later built in brick and stone. Early symbolic art confirms that myth came before monuments. Cylinder seals from the Uruk period, 3500 to 3100 BC, show stylized mountains with divine figures at their tops. Reed bundles shaped like doorways show temple entrances, but also cosmic thresholds. Step platforms appear in small carvings on amulets and seals, showing that the form had meaning before giant buildings existed. Egyptian pre-dynastic art shows similar ideas. Hala carvings show kings placed above enemies, and ceremonial mace heads show rulers on platforms. So the symbolism of height as authority, and elevation as power, fills visual culture before pyramids fill the horizon. The idea came first. The shape held meaning before it held weight. Pyramid symbolism was myth before it was architecture. A way of thinking about cosmic order, about the relationship between gods and people, about how reality itself was arranged. Geometry did not invent this meaning. Geometry expressed it. The ziggurat and the pyramid are translations of myth into physical space, attempts to make the axis mundi reachable, to build the sacred mountain where none naturally existed, to create a structure that embodied what creation myths describe, to point where heaven and earth meet, where order rises from chaos, where ascent becomes transformation. The pyramid form was waiting in the myths written in creation stories, stored in religious imagination. Mesopotamia built it first. Egypt refined it, but neither invented it. It was already there in the structure of how ancient minds understood the universe: vertical, hierarchical, rising toward meaning. The White Temple at Uruk rises 40 feet above the Mesopotamian plain. Its mud brick platform visible for miles across flatland. Built around 3200 BC, it is humanity's first monumental attempt to impose vertical geometry on a horizontal world, to build what nature did not provide. to make the mythic mountain physically reachable. This is not a pyramid in the Egyptian sense. The shape is different terrace platforms, stacked in receding stages, each level smaller than the one below, linked by external stairs or ramps. But the symbolic logic is the same. Height separates the sacred from the ordinary. Elevation brings the worshipper closer to the divine. The structure creates a threshold between earth and heaven where none naturally exists. The ziggurat is pyramid symbolism in Mesopotamian materials and beliefs, the architectural translation of cosmic myths into climbable space. By the end of the 4th millennium BC, ziggurats dominated the skylines of Sumerian cities Uruk, Eridu, Nippur. Each major city built its own sacred mountain, each dedicated to its patron god, each rising in stages toward the sky. Construction followed consistent rules of solid mud brick core filled the inside, sometimes strengthened with reed matting to prevent cracking. As the huge structure settled, the outside was covered with fired brick, often glazed in colors blue for heaven, white for purity, black for the underworld depths. Bitumen mortar sealed the joints against rain and wind. The result was astonishing permanence in a land where everything else, houses, palaces, city walls, was temporary, worn down by seasons and floods. The ziggurat lasted because it was meant to. It anchored the city in the cosmos, giving a stable point around which community life organized itself. To live in a Mesopotamian city was to live in the shadow of the sacred mountain, to shape daily life around the vertical axis linking mortal and divine. The ziggurat of Ur, built under King Ur-Nammu around 2100 BC, shows the mature form. 3 huge terraces rose one after another, reaching an estimated height of 70 feet. 3 great staircases met at the first terrace, one straight on, 2 along the sides, creating a planned path of approach and descent. Only priests could climb, only kings during certain rituals. The summit held a small temple, a single room where the god Nansen was believed to descend. And inscriptions on the foundation describe Ur-Nammu's goal. For his lady Ninjil, Ur-Nammu, the mighty man, king of Sumer and Akkad, has built her temple. The ziggurat is not a monument to the king's glory. It is a house built for divine habitation, a home raised above the city, a position between earth and sky. Excavations found no burial chambers, no treasure rooms, no funerary equipment. The ziggurat was not built to hold the dead. Its inside was solid brick. Its purpose was its vertical access. In the act of climbing, in the ritual of ascent, in the moment when priest or king reached the summit and stood before the god. The Temenenki at Babylon, the ziggurat that inspired the biblical Tower of Babel, shows the form at its highest expression. Built and rebuilt across centuries, reaching its final form under Nebuchadnezzar II around 600 BC, it rose in 7 stages, each painted a different color to represent cosmic zones. Ancient sources describe it as nearly 300 feet tall, dominating the Mesopotamian horizon, visible from far away, blurring the line between building and landscape. The name carries the belief of Temenenki, house of the foundation of heaven and earth, not a symbol of human ambition, but divine architecture, the physical form of cosmic structure. An inscription from Nebuchadnezzar's reign declares, "I mobilized all countries, everywhere to build a Temenenki. I made it the wonder of the people of the world. I raised its top to the heaven, made it magnificent." That verb matters, raised. The ziggurat does not reach toward heaven for human effort alone. It lifts divine presence, creates the meeting point, sets the foundation where separated realms can touch. Ritual texts describe the New Year festival at Babylon, when the king climbed to Temenenki to perform the sacred marriage rite, uniting with the goddess Ishtar at the summit, renewing cosmic order through ritual communion at the access point. The building made the ritual possible. The height made the communion possible. The form was function. Ziggurat spread across Mesopotamia, each version refining the idea but keeping the essentials: terrace construction, restricted ascent, a divine dwelling at the summit, alignment with the sky. They were not experiments. They were codified sacred technology. Answers to the religious problem of how to make the axis mundi physically real, how to turn mythic mountains into climbable structures. By the time Egypt began building pyramids, Mesopotamia had been building sacred mountains for more than 500 years. The symbolism was already set, and the ritual function was already proven. The architectural language of ascent is communion. Height is holiness, vertical geometry is cosmic diagram, all of it existed, written in brick, inscriptions, and ritual practice. Egypt refined the form, but Mesopotamia invented the grammar. The ziggurat taught the ancient world that mountains could be built, that heaven could be reached through stone and ritual, that the pyramid form, stepped or smooth, could serve as a threshold between human and divine. Everything that came later inherited this lesson. The written evidence is clear. Cuneiform inscriptions from temple foundations, cylinder seals, and ritual tablets describe ziggurats not as metaphor, but with direct religious language. These buildings were understood and recorded as Working cosmic architecture. Operating mechanisms that keep the connection between separated worlds. A temple hymn from the old Babylonian period addresses the ziggurat at Nippur. House, mountain, great lofty crown reaching heaven, side grown together with the sky. Your prince, the great Lord Enlil, the Lord whose word is unchangeable, has raised the house on your radiant place, made it stand on a holy dais. The meaning is direct. The temple holds a position. That position bridges a split. The building does not only show connection, it performs it. The name Anunnaki translates precisely house, Temen, foundation, and heaven, Kai, earth. Not reaching toward heaven, but foundation of heaven and earth. The support point, the anchor, the place where cosmic structure rests. Heaven does not float alone. Earth does not stand alone. They are bound together, and the ziggurat is the binding agent. Other temple names say the same thing. The ziggurat at Larsa was called Duranki House, bond of heaven and earth. At Sippur, the Babur House of Shining. At Borsippa, Urimanenki, house of the seven commands of heaven and earth. These are not pretty descriptions. They are functional labels that state what the building does. Within cosmic mechanics, the ziggurat bonds. It carries commands. It helps prayers rise and divine presence descend. The architecture works. Ritual texts from the Seleucid period describe the New Year festival at Babylon with step-by-step detail. On the fifth day, the king enters at dawn and climbs to the summit chamber. Priests purify him with water from the Tigris and Euphrates, symbolically uniting the two rivers, just as the ziggurat unites the two cosmic worlds. He removes his royal regalia crown, scepter, ring, and stands before the statue of Marduk as a supplicant, not a monarch. The high priest strikes the king's cheek, pulls his ears, forces him to kneel. The king speaks a negative confession: I have not sinned, Lord of the countries. I have not neglected your godship. I have not destroyed Babylon. The priest answers with restoration: fear not. Bel will listen to your prayer. He will magnify your dominion, enhance your kingship. The king receives back his regalia. His authority is renewed not by humans, but by divine confirmation reached by climbing to the summit where heaven's foundation meets earth's surface. Kingship is validated vertically. Authority flows downward only after climbing upward. This is recorded ritual, not modern guessing. The ziggurat's function appears in administrative texts, priestly manuals, and royal records. Height grants access to the divine. Ascent enables transformation. The building mediates. Priests navigated this vertical axis. As a profession, temple staff were arranged in rank. Senior priests were allowed summit access, while junior clergy stayed below. Training meant learning the right hymns, memorizing ritual timing, and understanding sky alignments that controlled when the god could be approached. A Sumerian proverb says, the temple rises toward heaven, but its foundation reaches the underworld. The ziggurat linked all three cosmic zones at once: the sky above, the human world at its base, and the chthonic depths below. Priests managed these connections, making sure cosmic traffic moved correctly, that offerings rose and divine will descended. So the ordered universe kept its shape. Holiness was literally positional. The Akkadian word El means both high and pure. Height and holiness were fused in language. To rise in body was to rise in spirit. The ziggurat's terraces matched degrees of purity. Each level was more sacred than the one below. Each stage was closer to divine essence. The written record removes doubt. Ziggurats were not just symbols of cosmic order. They were cosmic infrastructure. Engineered thresholds, maintained access points, ritual machinery connecting heaven and earth through vertical geometry. When Egyptian pyramid texts later described the pharaoh rising to the imperishable stars, when inscriptions call the pyramid a stairway or ladder, when the dead king climbs towards celestial communion, the language echoes Mesopotamian temple hymns, written centuries earlier. This is not separate invention. It is shared vocabulary. Pyramid symbolism is documented, written, direct, and clear. Not modern ideas pushed backward, but ancient understanding, kept in cuneiform and hieroglyphs describing the same vertical worldview. The same ritual ascent, the same belief that height connects, that elevation transforms, that sacred mountains built are natural. Work as bonds between separated realms. The ziggurat taught this language first. The pyramids spoke it. Later in an Egyptian accent, with Egyptian materials, but following grammar. Mesopotamia had already carved in clay. When Imhotep designed the step pyramid for King Djoser around 2630 BC, ziggurats had already been rising across Mesopotamia for 6 centuries. The timing matters. Egypt's pyramid age did not happen at the same time as Sumer's first sacred mountains. It came after. This does not require a story of direct teaching. Mesopotamian builders arriving at Saqqara with instructions. Cultural exchange in the ancient Near East was often quieter ideas, moving through trade routes, diplomacy, and the travel of craftsmen and merchants along paths linking the Nile Valley to the Levant, and onward to Mesopotamia. What matters is that when Egypt needed a monumental way to express its growing belief in divine kingship, the symbolic vocabulary already existed. The grammar of sacred elevation was already written. Egypt would speak it in a local way, fitting it to local materials and cosmology, but recognizing maybe without realizing that vertical geometry carried meaning beyond simple building innovation. Egypt's pyramid building did not appear from nothing. It grew from the mastaba, low, rectangular mud brick structures that held the dead and their funerary goods. Mastabas filled the cemetery landscapes of early dynastic Egypt, working tombs marking elite graves, different from common burials because they lasted and could be seen. The mastaba was horizontal. It hugged the earth. Its authority came from mass, not height. Solid, lasting, but grounded. Djoser's architect changed this by introducing stacking. The step pyramid at Saqqara rises in 6 levels, each rectangle smaller than the one below, creating a terrace form that climbs 200 feet above the desert floor. The result is clearly pyramidal, in essence a sacred mountain, built from limestone, dominating the necropolis, visible across huge distances. The similarity to Mesopotamian ziggurats is immediate and striking. Both use step construction. Both rise in receding stages. Both use exterior stairways or ramps to connect levels, and both serve as architectural bridges between earth and the realm beyond. The materials differ. Egypt had limestone, while Mesopotamia used mud brick, but the symbolic logic is the same. Height elevates, ascent transforms, the structure mediates between mortal and divine. Trade routes linked Egypt to Mesopotamia from the 4th millennium BC onward. Cedar from Lebanon, lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, copper from Sinai. Goods moved along networks that carried more than objects. Ideas moved. Religious concepts traveled. Craftsmen saw foreign techniques and reshaped them for local use. Egyptian cylinder seals from the first dynasty show Mesopotamian influence in imagery and design. Early dynastic art uses motifs recognized from Sumerian visual culture. Later diplomatic letters show ongoing contact between Egyptian and Mesopotamian courts. The ancient Near East was not a set of isolated cultures growing separately. It was a connected web, a region where one culture's innovations could shape another's. The claimed pyramid symbolism rose in Egypt without any awareness of Mesopotamian temple building assumes an isolation that did not exist. Yet Egypt was not simply copying. The step pyramid differs from the ziggurat in important ways. Ziggurats were solid inside, with only the summit temple reachable. Djoser's pyramid contains internal corridors, burial rooms cut into bedrock beneath the superstructure, and a network of tunnels linking spaces above and below ground. Ziggurats house gods. Pyramids house kings, or more precisely, they house the transformation of kings into gods. The focus shifted from divine ascent to royal ascent, from making a home for deities to helping the pharaoh travel into the afterlife and achieve stellar immortality. The symbolism changed to fit Egyptian beliefs. The Nile Valley's natural landscape had cliffs and plateaus, while Mesopotamia had only flat land. Egyptian religion centered on the sun rock crossing the sky. The horizon is a threshold, the stars as eternal beings. The pyramid would come to express this Egyptian worldview while keeping the shared principle both cultures held. Vertical architecture is cosmic machinery, height is a path to transcendence. Mesopotamia built mountains so gods could descend, and Egypt built mountains so kings could rise. The direction differed. The idea that movement needs vertical architecture did not. The step pyramid marks Egypt's entry into a shared sacred language. Djoser's monument speaks with local terms about local belief, but the grammar what pyramidal forms mean and do was already set. Egypt inherited a symbolic system and made it Egyptian, just as later cultures would inherit the pyramid and make it their own. Pyramid symbolism crossed borders because the questions it answered were universal. How do mortals approach divinity? How does authority show up in space? How can a building carry a universe? Mesopotamia answered first. Egypt answered differently, but in recognizable terms. The conversation started earlier. Egypt joined it. The inside walls of 5th and 6th dynasty pyramids, beginning with Unas around 2375 BC, hold the oldest religious writing carved in stone. These pyramid texts, hundreds of spells and utterances carved in vertical columns of hieroglyphs, were never meant for living people to read. They speak to the dead king, guiding him through change, giving him the words he needs to move through the afterlife and claim his place among the gods. And they describe, with ritual precision, ascent. Not a poetic rise, but real vertical movement through cosmic architecture. The pyramid is not a tomb where the king sleeps. It is a vehicle through which he climbs, a mechanism that carries his change from earthly ruler to celestial being. The texts treat the structure as functional: a ladder, a stairway, a ramp built to bridge the gap between earthly death and starlike immortality. Utterance 267 speaks to the pyramid directly. A stairway to the sky is laid for him that he may ascend on it to the sky. Utterance 365 continues, the skies read. Floats are launched for Ra that he may cross on them to the horizon. The skies. Read floats are launched for an ass that he may cross on them to the horizon too. Ra. Utterance 572 describes the mechanism. I have trodden those thy rays as a ramp under my feet whereon I mount up to Ra. The word shift stairs, floats, rays, but the direction never changes upward, skyward, toward the realm where the gods live. And the imperishable stars turn forever around the northern pole. The pyramid provides the method. The texts provide permission. Together, they create transformation. The imperishable ones, the chemisec, were circumpolar stars that never set below the horizon from Egypt. They turned around the pole in endless motion, neither rising nor falling, living beyond the cycles that ruled mortal life. To become imperishable was to escape death completely. To join the eternal circling of the northern sky. Utterance 251. Names the king's destiny. The king appears as a star. The king is a star which lights the sky. Utterance 461 declares, I am a soul. I am an imperishable star. This change is not just symbolic. Egyptian belief described the afterlife in real star terms. The pharaoh did not go to heaven as a vague idea. He became a specific object in the sky, holding a place visible to those still on earth, turning around the cosmic axis, just as Mesopotamian gods held tier places in their vertical cosmos. Different images, same structure. Authority is above, transformation requires ascent. Architecture makes the crossing possible. The pyramid works as a cosmic ladder, not through vague mysticism, but through physical alignment and symbolic design. Shafts in the Great Pyramid line up with specific stars, Sirius in the south, Thuban, then the pole star in the north. These were not decorations. They were channels, paths. For the king's vessel to travel, routes carved in stone, guiding movement. From burial chamber to sky. Utterance 508. Describes the journey in working detail. The king goes to the sky, to the sky. He goes up upon the smoke of the great exhalation. He flies up to the sky. Like a heron. He kisses the sky like a falcon. He leaps up to the sky like a grasshopper. Many methods, one direction. The text list. Options: smoke, bird, insect, but always vertical, always toward the stars, always through the pyramid's architectural bridge. Burial mattered, but it was not the main point. The body stayed below, preserved by mummification, sealed in granite sarcophagi. But preservation was not worship of the corpse. It was keeping the physical anchor while the king's transformed essence rose. The pyramid held both roles. The underground rooms for the body, the superstructure is a vertical pathway for the soul to leave. This separates Egyptian pyramids from Mesopotamian ziggurats, but keeps the shared principle. Sacred architecture operates on cosmic mechanics. The building is not a picture of transformation. It is the tool that makes transformation happen. The pyramid texts are moved out. They say plainly what the monument does. They describe the king's ascent using the same vertical language Mesopotamian hymns use for divine descent. They place the pharaoh inside a star hierarchy that mirrors the tiered divine administration the Anunnaki maintained. Egypt wrote in its own script, described its own sky. Aimed movement upward rather than downward. But the grammar stayed the same. Vertical geometry enables crossing between realms. Height grants access. The pyramids stepped in. Mesopotamia is smooth and Egypt acts as a bond between separated cosmic zones. The symbolism was never an Egyptian invention. It was a Near Eastern inheritance, reshaped for the Nile, written in the language of solar immortality, but following architectural logic. Established when the first ziggurats rose in Sumer and priests learned to write the words for heaven and earth. Creation begins with emergence. In Egyptian creation belief, before existence there was only none. Endless dark water, no sky, no land, no boundaries, chaos without structure, possibility without form. Then from these waters, the first solid thing appeared to Benben, the primeval mound, rising from the depths as the first point of creation. On top of this mound stood a tomb. The self-created God, speaking reality into being. From his words came Shu and Tefnut, air and moisture. From their union came Jeb and Nut, earth and sky. Creation unfolded as separation, order taken from chaos through division, through setting boundaries, through solid ground rising out of liquid nothing. The direction of emergence matters. Creation did not spread outward. It rose upward. The first act of existence was vertical. Land breaking the surface. Matter rising from the abyss formed, defeating formlessness through height. The Benben stone kept at Heliopolis in Ra's temple remembered this moment. Conical or pyramidal in shape, it marked the exact place where creation began. Where order first ruled chaos, where reality rose from non-existence. The stone was sacred not because of what it was made of, but because of its shape. Its geometry held the creation principle itself. Mesopotamian creation mythology follows the same logic with different names. The Enuma Elish describes Tiamat Saltwater chaos and abzu freshwater abyss existing together before creation. Mixed and undivided. Marduk defeats Tiamat and uses her body to separate heaven from earth, setting boundaries, creating vertical layers. Order appears through division. Chaos becomes cosmos when structure is imposed. The cosmic mountain, the axis, where heaven and earth meet, stands at the center of this organized reality. It is not just a symbol. It is the structural anchor, the point from which all space spreads. The original emergence point is made permanent in form. Both cultures tell the same event, creation as ascent, order as elevation, existence rising from the waters below. The pyramid, then, is not a building inspired by creation myths. It is creation myth turned into building. Creation frozen in geometry, emergence preserved in stone. Every pyramid reenacts the primeval mound rising from none. Every pyramid carries the idea that order rises, that reality moves upward from chaos, that existence itself is vertical at its core. The shape does not stand for this idea. The shape is this idea made permanent, built large enough to dominate landscapes, visible across distances that collapse time and place into one unified meaning. When Egypt built pyramids, it was building creation again and again, repeating the first moment of existence, giving kings access to the creation instant, allowing them to rise through the same vertical movement that brought the universe into being. Mesopotamia encoded the same rule in ziggurats. Different materials, different rituals, but the same recognition. The sacred mountain is not only memory of creation, it is participation in creation's ongoing structure, access to the axis where reality first rose and is still maintained. Creation myths are not just stories. They are blueprints. The pyramids stepped in Sumer smooth at Giza shows what happens when those blueprints turn from words into stone, when myth becomes architecture, when the moment of emergence is made permanent and climbable. The Benben taught this first in Egypt, but Mesopotamia had already learned it, built it in brick, acted it out in temple ritual. Pyramid symbolism comes before pyramids because creation symbolism comes before monuments. The form existed in myths, waiting to be built. The pyramid appears in Mesoamerica without contact with the old world. Temple pyramids rise at Teotihuacan and Chichen Itza's step platforms supporting shrines. Aligned with the sky, used as ritual places where priests mediate between earth and heaven. The Maya did not learn this from Egypt. The Aztecs did not inherit it from Mesopotamia. Yet they reach the same geometric answer to the same sacred problem: how to make the sacred mountain reachable, how to build the axis where divine and human worlds meet. And this repetition suggests something deeper than cultural borrowing. It points to a basic human recognition. Vertical space organizes meaning. Height expresses hierarchy, ascent changes the one who climbs. The pyramid form appears again and again because it expresses a universal intuition about how reality is organized. But the first time this intuition was written down and built as monumental architecture happened in ancient Mesopotamia. The Anunnaki myths did not describe alien builders or ancient astronauts. They described cosmic administrators, divine beings who organized the universe into vertical levels, who decreed fates from high positions, who established the rule that authority lives above and flows downward through ranks. And this was the logic that made pyramids meaningful: not building plans, but cosmic blueprints. Not instructions for construction, but an understanding of structure itself. How order comes from chaos, how boundaries create meaning, how geometry can map existence. The pyramid lasts because it speaks a language older than words. It needs no translation, no cultural background, no historical footnotes. The form speaks at once: this is important, this is sacred, this reaches towards something beyond the flat world of ordinary life. Stand before any pyramid: Giza, Saqqara, Babylon, and the message is the same: height matters, elevation changes. The vertical axis connects separated worlds. This is not something you are taught. It is an intuitive recognition of symbolic grammar written into humanity's earliest attempts to understand cosmic order. The Anunnaki did not build pyramids. They defined the worldview that made pyramids meaningful: the vertical hierarchy, the spatial religion, the recognition that the universe is built in rising levels and that sacred architecture must mirror that structure to work. Egypt inherited this logic and perfected it. Mesoamerica found it on its own. Many other cultures have reached for it too, building towers, temples, and monuments that climb toward the sky, driven by the same instinct that led the first Sumerian priests to stack bricks into terrace mountains. The pyramid is humanity's diagram of existence: order rising from chaos, meaning rising from matter, of the mortal reaching toward the eternal through stone and geometry, and the universal recognition that to climb is to approach truth.